I didn't want to be an accountant, and therefore I should not be an accounting major. But I did have a sense for business, and I think that's what I had gravitated towards. So I ended up choosing business economics as my major because that was really the only other business major available at that point, and I had no idea what business economics was. So that certainly made a whole lot of sense. And I was able to take obviously a lot of classes throughout the 4 years that I was there, including really amazing classes that proved to be very helpful for me, like skiing and basic bodybuilding. But then I also had my fair share of business economics and accounting and marketing and all kinds of good stuff. I did take organic chemistry really just to prove my father wrong. He told me that I couldn't possibly go into the healthcare field because I would never be able to get through organic chemistry. And I am proud to tell you all that I actually got an A in organic chemistry. Although I can't tell you a thing that I learned in that class, but I was really, really determined. And I think that probably is a common theme for me. So when I was a sophomore at Oneonta, I lived in McDuff. Freshman year, I lived in Wilbur. And in McDuff, and I understand that today is a very spring-like day in Oneonta, but for the most part, I will tell you that there were 2 seasons in Oneonta, and then beyond there, I went to Cornell. So I lived in upstate New York for 6 years. There are 2 seasons, and that is winter and the 4th of July. So if it is a sunny day today and some people have decided to blow this off, I totally, totally get it. And I am looking out at a very sunny day here as well. So in McDuff, they had a 1-credit course that was given in the basement of the dorm, and that was in career planning. And so one of my roommates had said, you know, I'm taking this 1-credit class, you should take it too. We don't even have to leave the dorm. And that was really, really attractive at the time. So we took this class, and it was filling out a ton of surveys, and it was answering, I like this, I prefer this, I feel that I have talent here versus there. And when you filled out everything, they churned it into, probably, by the way, it was, you know, it was not all, you know, on a computer or in a survey monkey. And it came back that I should either be a hospital administrator or a hotel manager. And then I had the opportunity to do an internship that summer. And if I did an internship, I would get 2 additional credits. And at the time, that seemed like an awesome idea. So I didn't know anyone in the hotel industry, but I did know a hospital administrator because I had actually worked at the beach club the summer before, and I was responsible for sweeping all of the sand out of the lockers at the beach club. And so I approached one of the members of the beach club whose locker I had swept and said, I know you're a hospital administrator. I have this opportunity to do an internship for some credits at school to determine whether or not this is a career I'd like to pursue. And his name is Alan Cotman. And he said, Lauren, I'd be more than happy to allow you to do this, but I can't pay you. So back to my dad again. And I said, you know, I have this great opportunity to work for free. You know, but it would help me to direct me in terms of what I was going to do when I grew, you know, what I was going to be when I grew up. And that, I think, was, you know, all I needed to tell my dad was that I was going to have some direction. And so he agreed to pay my tolls and continue to pay my allowance so that I could go and do this free internship in the Bronx. And I had a great summer. And I can't tell you, you know, how overwhelmed I was with just being in a hospital and the magic of being in a hospital, that by the end of that summer, I knew absolutely, you know, that I was going to be a hospital administrator. And, you know, what I will also say is that I had a few assignments during that time, and I hope they never, ever used the policies that I wrote because I didn't understand what the policies were. So one of them was on waste management, and I had to come up with a policy for medical waste, regulated medical waste. And I got a couple of copies from other hospitals. I copied which looked good from this one and that one, but really didn't even understand that I needed to assess what they actually did and then reflect it in a policy. I learned that a little bit later on in my life, but hopefully they never used it, and it was just a good experience for me. And so I then went on to pursue my master's degree. So, that was, I guess, the summer between my sophomore year and junior year. And I continued and finished at Oneonta and had applied. I took my GMATs. I actually studied at Hartwick College, and I did pretty well. And so I ended up going to Cornell, which was one of the accredited health administration master's programs. And I will never forget that summer before I started in graduate school. I was on the beach with my brother, and he said, "Lauren, are you sure you know what you're doing?" And I said, "Well, yeah, why?" And he said, "Because I don't actually think Cornell accepted you for real." He said, "I think they did this for a goof because you have no idea how hard this is going to be." And I said, "Well, you don't have no idea how hard I'm going to work." And so sure enough, I go to Cornell, and I was absolutely sure, and I had this focus, of being a hospital administrator. But taking a step back a little bit, during my internship, not only did I learn very little about waste management and disposal, but my mentor there, who was someone who worked for Alan Cotman, and we talked a little bit about healthcare careers. And, we talked about being a hospital administrator. We talked a little bit about being a consultant, or, some of the other aspects of, healthcare that I could have gone into and pursued. And, there was ambulatory care, which was actually somewhat new at the time, that there were a lot of different opportunities. I could have done medical group management versus hospital, but I was really sure that I loved being in a hospital, at least, certainly then, and I can tell you still now. But the one thing that she told me was, if you went into consulting, you can control your time a little bit better. So if you're going to pursue and have a family, or you can, do different things like travel, that you have a little bit more of a flexibility if you happen to go into a consulting type arrangement. And I heard it, but I didn't necessarily, or I listened to it, but I didn't necessarily hear it. And, my takeaway was really, I can do anything I want, and I will figure out how to make it work, because I think at the time there was probably, and it's not that it was such a long time ago that, women were not in the workplace, but I do think that, I came from, somewhat of an old school kind of home where, you didn't necessarily pursue a career before you pursued marriage and family and those types of things. But my takeaway with my conversations with that mentor was, I can figure out how to do anything. I just have to figure out my priorities at that time, and those can change over time. And that certainly, paved a lot in terms of my mindset. So fast forward, I go to Cornell, and about 2 days into my orientation at Cornell, I met a guy, and he actually is still now my husband. I did not go with that pursuit. I actually had, a boyfriend at home, and it just happened to work out that way. It was a very small program. Cornell only accepted 20 students a year into the program. And so there were only 40 of us in, every single class together for 2 years. And so Josh, who is now my husband, we've been married for quite some time. That was not my pursuit, but it certainly kind of helped to pave some of this away for me. He actually went into consulting and is now a hospital administrator as well. So in graduate school, it was kind of fun because, from day one, I was almost considered an adult. And it was like the first time I felt like I was an adult. At Oneonta, I think I had a lot of growing up to do. I was definitely an immature, student. And I will tell you, I was also a late bloomer. And at Cornell, all of a sudden, they probably based a lot on my brother's conversation with me that I needed to prove something to somebody. I arrived there, and I was, most definitely an adult. I was a professional student, and I was going to take this really seriously because while my friends went and got jobs, I was now still in school. And, so I did a summer residency in between my first year and my second year. I did that at New York Hospital Medical Center of Queens, and had a great experience. And then when it came time to graduating from Cornell, because it was a 2-year program, I needed to now get my full-time job. And so, how do you get a job when you're living up in Ithaca, but I planned on moving back home with my parents. I grew up on Long Island. And, there were these postings, job postings, and most of them were for fellowships, which would be like a postgraduate program. And I had no interest in that whatsoever because I wanted a job. I didn't want to keep looking for a job every single year. I wanted a full-time job. And for some reason, I thought I was going to go straight to the top. Well, I will tell you that that kind of happens, but more so in healthcare maybe than in other places. But I ended up seeing this posting for a job at New York Methodist Hospital in Brooklyn, and I knew that that was pretty close to my house, certainly commutable. And but it was for a fellowship, and I didn't have much of an interest in doing it, except that there was someone else in my cohort who was also applying, and so I said, maybe I should just explore this and see what this is that they're proposing. And so I went and I interviewed, and I was there for several hours, and very quickly they were talking about when I start and what it's going to be, like, and where I'm going to be working, where I'm going to be, spending my time. And it was kind of funny because it was like really my first real job interview, and I kind of, look back at it and, now, of course, I realize, that when something fits, it fits. But I left that interview and I got home. My dad said, "How did it go?" And I said, "Well, they're kind of talking about like when I'm going to start." I said, "So I guess it went pretty well." And I got back up to Cornell, and on Monday morning, I get a call from New York Methodist Hospital. This is still before we had emails, believe it or not. And I get this call, and this woman, Susan, says, "Lauren, we're very pleased to offer you this administrative fellowship. So when are you going to start?" And I said, "Well, I think I'm supposed to ask, certain questions like compensation, benefits." By the way, I had no idea what a benefit was, but I knew that I was supposed to ask these questions. And so they told me that I was going to be getting paid $25,000 for the year, and that I would have all of comparable benefits to a departmental manager. Again, I still don't even know what that meant whatsoever, except that I knew that $25,000 even then seems a little bit low. And so I went from, especially because my friends from Oneonta who graduated straight from Oneonta went into teaching, and they were getting paid $35,000 to $40,000. So me coming out with a lot of debt from Cornell, and 2 years later with a Cornell master's degree, I was actually worth less. And that was definitely eye-opening, and an eye-opener and a waking moment for me. And so I get up to campus, I find Josh, my now husband, and I fell apart. I was hysterical, and he did not know what to do with me. And he said, "What is the problem?" And I said, "Well, I got the job offer." And he said, "Well, that's great, congratulations." And I was like, "No, I have to tell him." And I told him what they had offered me, and he thought about it for a minute, and he said, "We have to call my dad." Now, his dad had also graduated from Cornell in the master's program. He was actually one of the founding, or the first class to graduate from the Sloan program in health administration back in the 60s. So he called his dad, who lives in Canada, and his dad said, "I'll be there for dinner." And so he got into his car and he drove to Cornell and takes us to dinner. And there's a lot of small talk here and there. And the one thing I will learn is that, the most important part of a conversation usually happens 5 minutes before the end of the conversation. And, so a lot of it was just kind of, niceties and the weather and things along those lines. And then he said, "So, Lauren, my son tells me that you're upset about your job offer. What is it that you're upset about? That you got the offer?" And I said, "No, it's what I'm now valued at." And he said, he listened to the whole thing, and he said, "Well, I'll give you my 2 cents worth because you're not paying me for it, and it's worth about as much as you're paying me for it. But you have nothing to add and everything to gain from this position." He said, "This is a great hospital with a great reputation. You will be working with people who get it and know how to do it and know how to do it well." He said, "And you're coming out of school with no experience whatsoever, And as far as I'm concerned, you're going to live with your parents. You're going to defer your student loans for a year because you're in this fellowship program. And if anything, you should be paying them. And I walked away from that and said, well, all right, I guess that's what I'm going to do. And so I will tell you that, he's got his faults, but I will say he gave me the best advice I ever got. And it's advice I give to people all the time. And that was take the job. And so I took that job and I started there as an administrative resident, even though my offer was for fellow, because internally an administrative resident was less threatening. And therefore, more people will teach you a whole lot more if they don't feel that you're threatening to them. And before that year was up, I was promoted to assistant vice president. I spent most of my time doing a lot of stuff with managed care. And this is one of those situations where you roll up your sleeves and you try to figure out how to add as much value as you possibly can. So at the time, managed care, or the insurance companies, were enrolling doctors to be participating providers. And when I started, there were probably about 500 doctors on our medical staff, and they didn't want to participate in any of these insurance plans because they were, they were the enemy. And very soon they figured out that if they didn't participate, they would have no patients. And so my job, and I created this, and this is part of, the fun of healthcare. I figured out that the only way that they were going to fill out the applications is if, one, they had the application and someone actually did the work for them. So I requested applications from Oxford and United Healthcare and US Healthcare and all of the different insurance companies, Empire, Blue Cross and Blue Shield. And I chose our busiest doctors because I got a report. It was on a green bar thing. I don't think any of you know about green bar reports, but it was this green bar report, and I would look and see how many admissions they had. And I knew that the only way that we were going to keep those admissions is if they were participating providers. And so I spent every day filling out applications for the doctors. I took their medical staff application and I then had them sit down with me and update things. I made the photocopies for them and I mailed it for them. And then I waited for the insurance companies to republish, because it wasn't on the internet yet, their participating providers. They'd have a book, right? And I would keep track of it that way. And they produced these books probably, every month or so they would send out updates. And so it wasn't even in Excel. I hate to admit it, it was actually on something called Lotus 123. And by the way, I did not learn that at Oneonta or maybe even at Cornell. Cornell was a Mac place. But I kept track of it. It did convert to Excel at some point. And at some point, we went really from 500 doctors to about 1,200 doctors. And I think a lot of the reason why doctors were joining the medical staff is because we were providing these services to them. And so, by the time my administrative residency had finished, I had certainly been exposed to a whole lot of other things as well. But I think that the key there was that I figured out how to add value and how to be almost irreplaceable. Not that I couldn't be replaced, but I was already doing all of this stuff that wasn't being done before. So when they made me the assistant vice president, I can tell you that I was a little disappointed that they didn't make me the director of managed care, because that was a really, really hot, topic at the time. And one of my colleagues said, Lauren, you don't want to be the director of managed care because there's no director of non-managed care. And I thought about that one for a bit, and I said, all right. And so I was there at Methodist for 23 years. And so I grew up there. I really did. I started, as a resident very soon after being an assistant vice president. Just before I went and got married to Josh, I became a vice president. I do believe that timing kind of coincided with changing my business cards in my name so that we shouldn't have to do it twice, because I went from Katz to Yedvab. And at some point I became a senior vice president, and before long I was also the chief operating officer. And I had 2 children mixed in there as well. And I can tell you that, one, you can do it all. You just have to figure out how to make it work for you. And from there, why did I leave there? I left there because New York Presbyterian became our active parent. And I expected for many years that I was my boss's succession plan. And he was an amazing, amazing mentor, and actually continues to be today. but he probably stayed a little bit longer than he should have for my career. That being said, I never left there because every time I even, contemplated it, I would go back to happy. And that's, one of the other things that we'll talk about in a minute. So New York Presbyterian came in, they became our active parent. And one of the things that they typically do is they clean out the administration and they bring in their own team. And that is exactly what had happened. And quite honestly, it was the best thing that could have happened. But at the time, you never really know that. They decided that they wanted a physician leader. And, as a hospital administrator, I'm not a physician. And therefore, I was no longer qualified for that position. And at the time, of course, it was really, really upsetting. But I don't necessarily know that you can live in a house, build your house, fill your house, and then sell your house and continue to live there when a new family moves in. It just, it just doesn't really work quite well. But at the time, of course, you don't really know that. You just feel like, you've just been stripped of like your life because that place was my life. And so I left there, and before I actually even had signed my separation agreement, I had already accepted a position with Northwell Health, which is a huge healthcare system on Long Island, and actually they're also part of Queens, they're part of Westchester and growing, but it's about 24 hospitals, and definitely, and I live within Northwell country. And so they had recruited me very, very aggressively, and it's always really nice to be recruited rather than retained. So we justified why I was leaving Methodist in the first place. And I was there for 2 years. And at some point, I realized that, going from this like single shingle where, as an independent hospital, we were able to make all of our decisions. We decided we needed an ambulatory care building across the street from the hospital. It was me that was going to the Board of Standards and Appeals, in the city in order to get those approvals. It was, me and my colleagues that, were presenting to all the financial institutions in order to do a bond issue and get our bond rating, to an A rating to make sure that we would be able to fund the project. It was, all of us making those decisions all the way along. And now all of a sudden I'm working for a very large health system, and I'm working at one of the hospitals within the health system. And the structure was very different in that you weren't really expected to have a lot of original thoughts and ideas. I'm sorry, I just logged out. I know you can see me, but I cannot see you. You're back. It was 2 years of really just kind of like carrying out different tasks. And, while I had, a very big job, and it was a great place, don't get me wrong. And in fact, if you've seen Lenox Hill, the show on Netflix, I was there for at least some of it. I know I was definitely in episode, I think it's 5 or 6, not doing anything very glamorous. I was actually surfing at a holiday party, but I will say that those are some of the best times that you can have, as a leader is surfing your team. But I was there, and I did speak to the leadership a couple of times, at Northwell to say, listen, you hired me to do this job, and there are things that I'm really, really good at that I'm not able to do because I don't have a seat at this table at corporate. And I'm not saying that I want to leave the hospital, but these are, there are muscles in me that are atrophying, and there are things that I'm really good at that you can benefit from. And, very soon thereafter, they asked me to go and lead the Brooklyn efforts and build an ambulatory strategy in Brooklyn for corporate. So they thought that that was going to be the answer to me, producing some of my, strategic thinking. And that's not where I wanted to be. And so, before I actually even started at corporate, I had already interviewed here at Atlantic Health. And, the understanding, I would say within the 30 minutes of speaking to one of my now bosses, she said, "Why aren't you the chief operating officer at Overlook?" And I said, "It's a great question." And so, I had already interviewed here and pretty much accepted the position before I was even able to resign and give notice at Northwell. So I treated it as a consulting engagement. I gave them the information, for goodbye, Deborah Scott, for what they needed. And then I left and I came here, and this has been truly my happy place. I commute 53 miles each way, which is actually a lot when, in New York terms, it's like, kind of like dog years. And I will tell you that I don't have any regrets whatsoever, because I am in like this perfect situation where I am a hospital administrator, I'm running the operations, but then I also have a corporate responsibility, and I oversee the laboratory, pharmacy, and radiology for all of the health system. And I can tell you, being part of a pandemic, one, you get to learn an organization certainly really, really well, but I've never been challenged more and yet more rewarded overseeing the laboratory and pharmacy specifically during a pandemic. So, well, most people have, some terrible, terrible and horrible stories, and I can't wait to get through this and get, onto our next chapter. I will tell you that personally and professionally, this has been probably one of the most rewarding components of my career, is helping to manage through a pandemic and going from running a laboratory that didn't have the ability to do a COVID test to now having 9 platforms and being able to be completely self-reliant, across New Jersey, and being able to produce, results in 24 hours, trying to figure out how we're going to get, essentially ice cream trucks at every single school so that we can provide testing, and results to, people so that they can start playing sports again. Now rolling out vaccines. I mean, talk about a light at the end of the tunnel, and getting all of our team members vaccinated. On Tuesday, I think we had hit, I think it was 170,000 doses that we had administered. It's interesting. There is definitely a handful of people that are definitely concerned and not necessarily convinced that they want to get vaccinated, but our goal and our job is to educate, provide as much information so that people can make decisions on their, based on, their understanding and based on that information. But obviously I want my team to be protected and safe, because obviously there were too many people that, were not protected during this. So I guess I just brought you up to speed in terms of where I was and where I am, and, my journey. And I'm obviously very passionate about what I do. Some, recognitions, and this is like kind of like funny because I'm not really a bragger. I'm really definitely more someone that just appreciates the fact that I have been happy and have enjoyed my career. I do have 2 amazing children, and they are my cheerleader. And I don't know, I have a son and a daughter, but they challenge me every single day. But they are definitely, as my grandfather would refer to, the dividends. And and they remind me my first and foremost job is being a mom, but I would not be as good a mom if I didn't work full time and I didn't have this career. I was Crane's 40 under 40 rising star. I like to say that I actually was the Crane's rising star at the age of 34. So it's not like I had to wait until I was 39 and just get in under the radar there. In fact, I think now you can't actually see it, but there is a little plaque with a horrible picture of me. I was also a modern healthcare up and comer. And at the time, I think, people were kind of commenting like, I thought you already arrived, which, is, I guess, a nice compliment. I was an alumni, Oneonta alumni of distinction, not too long ago. And that was, really, really rewarding, and wanted to be recognized for where I've come, and where I was. But in terms of, my lessons learned, I will tell you that it's really important to be happy where you are and to have fun at work, because you spend almost all of your waking hours at work, and you should definitely find your happy, because when you find it and then you don't have it, you know exactly what you're missing and how you need to figure out how to do that. I I'm the product of exceptional mentoring, and I will take advice from anyone and everyone because I think everyone has a really, really valid point of view, and it's important that you listen from every single direction. Some of the best lessons I've learned have probably been from my kids, and out of the mouths of babes. Um, in terms of being where I am now and hiring students, I will tell you that if you're a writer, you separate yourself from the pack because most people can't write. And the only, way to have a narrative and to tell a story and to sell something is to be able to write, right? And as an economics major, I can tell you that I really didn't have to write, but I knew I was always a really good writer. And I do think that really does control the agenda. So I would highly recommend that you either learn how to write or enjoy writing. Don't do anything you wouldn't be proud to read about. And that's something I actually learned in graduate school. It was actually probably a Harvard Business Review article of some sort that we had to read. It's taken on a new life now. But, I think at the time it was, an executive that, took the membership up to a country club or something as part of their benefits. And, then at some point, working for a not-for-profit, there was, some criticism that, the hospital that they were working for was struggling, but yet they were paying for that country club. Well, I would never do that in the first place. That being said, the lesson learned there was don't do something you wouldn't be proud to read about. Now, I think with social media, and I have this conversation with my kids all the time, not only should you never do anything you wouldn't be proud to read about, but you certainly don't want to post about it. And I think that that's something that is a new challenge for your generation that I did not necessarily have to deal with. Keep in mind I was married before the internet, which kept me very, very safe, especially in Oneonta. I will tell you that I gravitate and I always enjoy working with people that find me yes, and I think that I feel like I pursue that with everybody. So even if it's a matter of calling and having to change a reservation or, whatever it might be, generally speaking, the person who starts off with no, I'm probably going to fight with. But now, in my mature age, I probably have a little bit more fun with it and try to help them find the yes. But the people that I really want to surround myself with are not the people that I have to teach, to get there. So, there are definitely a cadre of people out there that say no, or no, but, and then you can get them to sway them to yes. The people who say yes and are the leaders in the room. And, I am absolutely, going to cheer for them the loudest. Like my father-in-law had said, take the job. I can tell you that I've had this conversation with students year after year after year, because I do deal a lot with the students and the alumni, as an alumni board member at Cornell. And most people are looking for that perfect job. You're looking for the best place to go on vacation. You're looking for the best place to live. You're looking for, that job, that, perfect job that's going to allow you to have, work-life balance and freedom and a beanbag chair and a granola bar at 3 o'clock and whatever it might be. And at the end of the day, there is no perfect job. It's what you take that job and make it perfect for you. And, I can tell you that, I certainly did that, with New York Methodist. And you know what, the benefits, where the dollars come somewhat after that. I did catch up. It only took me a couple of years before I made as much money as the person who worked in the laundry. But you know what, I learned from that and I worked my way, through that and figured it all out. The other thing, by the way, students that graduate now are a lot smarter than I was when I graduated. And I know that because I deal with students every single year. We bring in administrative residents and, for summer or whatever it is, and they are way smarter than most of the people that I graduated with, including myself. And as a result, I find that students are actually already talking up here. And most of us aren't there yet, and you have to get us there. So you have to get us there by starting off with this is a breadbox, because you're assuming that everyone who's in a senior position knows more than you, and that's not always the case. In fact, it's most often not. So you need to really, make things as simple as possible in order to drive home that idea. And, so this is a breadbox. This is what it stores. This is what it's going to do. And then you young whippersnappers show us that you can share your screen, and then we're all done for. So I'm always impressed with, with that. But, just remember, you have to get us to where you are, and, without being condescending, of course. But know that you probably know more about any subject coming out of school than all of our practical knowledge that we have now. So you just have to kind of, spoon feed us to get us to where you want us to be thinking. So I guess I'm gonna, stop talking for a minute, because I feel like I just went on for quite some time, and I apologize. But I'm happy to answer questions. I mean, I feel badly that, there's only a couple of us here, but it actually gives me the opportunity to really, get to know you all and answer your questions.
So jump right in. I know that the students have been active doing the Zoom thing for almost a year now. So jump right in.
So I had a question. So I was just wondering, what's like your daily life like as a chief officer? Because I have no idea what you would do.
Every single day is different, and that's probably the reason why I gravitated to healthcare in the first place. I personally am a little bit more of like a workaholic, but I will tell you that I probably get in about an hour to an hour and a half before any meetings start, because I want to start with a clean slate. But as the chief operating officer of the hospital, I want to know what's in my hospital, right? So how many patients do I have in beds right now? How many are coming in? How many do I project going out? What does my staffing look like? Not only from a nursing staff, but what other support staff, even from environmental services and the laundry and food and nutrition. I need to make sure that I've got everyone in place in order to care for our patients. And now there's also this really big shift towards outpatient. So it's not just a matter of what's in the hospital, but we take care of so many patients. They may come in for a procedure and leave. So are we prepared for that? And how many patients are coming in on a daily basis? And if anyone needs to be recovered, if anyone is then going to be admitted, do I have places for all of these patients? Now we're coexisting with COVID, right? So back in April, my entire hospital was COVID, and we went from, this is just a good example, I guess. We have 40 critical care beds, and that's, it's a good size critical care unit, and they're actually broken into multiple units. By April, I had to ramp up and create 105 critical care beds. I am generally staffed for about 25 critical care beds because our utilization is so tightly managed, right? So I've got staff to take care of 25 patients, and I needed to figure out how to ramp up to take care of 105 of the sickest patients this staff has ever seen. In addition, of course, we had, several hundred other, not critical care patients, but also with COVID. And, once it was 100% COVID, it was actually almost easier. The problem that we had is that we had lab tests that we were sending out. We weren't getting results for 3 or 4 days. So until then, we had no idea whether or not a patient had COVID. I mean, at some point you kind of had a better sense. The emergency department was able to assess things, but for some time we didn't know, or it wasn't confirmed. And you certainly, if you came into the hospital and you didn't have COVID, you didn't want to come out with it, right? So we were, strapped for trying to figure out how do we keep everybody safe and separated until we confirmed their results, and then cohorted them. But, in order to create that many critical care beds, we needed to double up. So not only did I have, one patient in a critical care bed, I don't know how familiar you are with the hospital, we had actually put 2 beds in that room. And, with all of their pumps and with everything else, I mean, it was, it was pretty incredible. And, that we had to do all of that, but we did it. And, even borrowing ventilators, and so those are all things that come into play in operations of a hospital, making sure that the doctors and the nurses have everything that they need, and all of the therapists and the technologists, they have everything that they need in order to provide excellent patient care. So my day-to-day, I mean, every day it's a little bit different.
All right, thank you.
Sure. Carmela? Don't be so shy.
Yeah, it's Carmel. No, I was going to ask you about like how COVID impacted like how you do your job, and you answered it.
Okay, well, I will tell you though that, now coexisting with COVID is even a bigger challenge. It's really easy when you have like all of something or none of something. Once you have like this hybrid world, right? So, remember that when COVID filled our hospital, and in New Jersey and New York, we were really, hit probably the hardest out of anywhere in the country. And we kind of got it first, right? And while there was, a pocket in Washington, and California had a little bit, but I mean, we were slammed, right? And, so we went, all of a sudden we were 100% COVID within, a very, very short period of time. Everywhere else in the country, they're kind of looking at us like, what's the big deal? What are they over? They just don't know what they're doing. They don't know how to take care of these patients. But everything that the rest of the country learned, they really learned because of all the studies that we were doing and all of the experimental stuff that we were doing. And, even within, not even having enough PPE or masks, and, we weren't, the administrators weren't wearing masks because we didn't want to take them from the healthcare people, right? From the people the direct care providers. So that part of it was easy. Everything else shut down. Or elective surgery shut down, right? No one was coming to the hospital for an x-ray. Nobody was, getting a total joint replacement. They could wait for something along those lines. There were other issues that happened as a result of it. People weren't even, people weren't out playing sports, so they weren't getting injuries and coming to the emergency department with a blown out knee. And because everybody was socially distant as best as we can, guess, and wearing masks, and, they were no longer going into their offices, no one was getting sick. It was a phenomenon that, we didn't have any strokes coming in, and we're a regional, stroke center and a center for neurosciences. We have a helipad on our roof. We get, probably 3 or 4 heli transports a week that come here for neuro emergencies. Nobody came. Nobody had a heart attack. It was just really, really unbelievable. The only thing that we were taking care of was COVID patients. And as those numbers started coming down, and my chair of surgery had predicted, I think back in April, he said, come June, we'll be back. And sure enough, in June, we really revamped up. And remember, we have a very low margin as a hospital. We needed to get as many patients back in and take care of as many people to make up for the fact that, one, we had spent a ton of money. And yes, we did get federal funding, but certainly nothing in comparison to what we actually had to spend paying for agency nurses at, 300 times what they would normally get paid, because we, had to take care of all of those patients that we didn't have the staff for. And, so we had to bring in as much as we could. Everyone that hadn't had a mammography that was supposed to be scheduled, we were back getting them in. Everyone that needed a colonoscopy, everybody that needed to come into the hospital for one thing or another. I mean, there was a lot of bariatric surgery because, you think about the people who didn't do well with COVID were obese, they had diabetes, they had, a lot of, comorbid conditions. So a lot of those people kind of like saw the light and said, I need to get in there and do what I need to do. So, we then, very quickly, like, rebuilt the hospital, and then all of a sudden the numbers started coming up again in the fall. And every holiday we kind of like anticipated. At that point already we had much better lab testing, right? But now we're in a process of, we built 2 new units so that we would have the ability to separate COVID from non-COVID, and keep the confidence of the community up so that they would know that if they came to the hospital, they weren't going to get COVID. So the second wave, we were much calmer. We had a lot of collaboration. There was a lot of, courage and adaptation. but we're now coexisting, between, both worlds. And so I have separate units where I have COVID patients and separate staffs. And, we're just in the process of, as those numbers continue to come down, moving them and, so that we can create more capacity as the non-COVID patients come in again. And it just seems to be coming in waves. It's really phenomenal, to manage it and to live through it on this side of things.
Thank you.
Sure.
Hi, Lauren, it's Charlene. You did an excellent job. I had all these questions kind of mapped out, and I kept crossing them off as you covered in your normal conversation. Things the students need to know. You're not going to land perfect job on day one. You might be, who knows what, doing for, a month, a day, a year. But
Right.
I want to thank you for the way that you were speaking about that journey, so that they know they've got a journey in front of them.
Mhm.
But if there's something you could elaborate on, and I know that you have to do this on a minutely basis, as it turns out throughout our life, we are going to have to deal with people. So can you give our students, I mean, they have, of course, their class, and they might work on a project, and then, they move on to the next class and next project. So they're not with the same students all the time. But could you give them a couple high flyovers on interpersonal skills, how they can get someone to do what they want, what you need them to do, and they don't want to do it, some of the stuff that you have to deal with on a minutely basis. Can you share some of that expertise with our ladies here?
Sure. And I have this conversation a lot with my daughter, who's 15, but, hopefully, she'll take some of these skills and use them in the future. I will tell you what's kind of funny is that as a business economics major, there wasn't very much in terms of group discussion. It was really, supply, demand, and, what is that going to do? But, in terms of, building your leadership skills, because that's really what we're talking about, starting as a student and starting, young and inexperienced, like I said, a lot more than you think you do, and a lot more than probably the people that you're going to go and work with, because you just came from, this outstanding, educational program. But you can't be threatening about it, right? So similar to me going in being the administrative resident because it was less threatening, you're going to be going into an organization and, well, in school, I felt like even at Cornell, we were continuously told that we needed to challenge things, right? We needed to kick the tires and test things. But in the real world, it's not exactly how you want to do it. So, they call it, I guess, the Socratic approach. So if you want anyone to teach you or explain why they're doing something a certain way without being confrontational, you just have to really present things as almost like a question, So it's, why do you do something the way you do it? Not, because you're criticizing them, but understanding why they approach something a certain way. Understanding where someone's coming from certainly helps. But being a leader, in a group means that people definitely gravitate towards you. I mean, my philosophy throughout life has been you want to sit next to the smartest person in the room. You don't have to be the smartest person. You just want to sit next to them. And, so, my experience has always been gravitating to those leaders, and I think that you're going to surround yourself with people, who know or think about things differently. And, I know there's a lot of, obviously, diversity is a huge, conversation and it should be a focus. And, but I will tell you that really, that's not just a matter of race. It's not a matter of, male versus female. I think that some of it comes from age diversity. I think it comes from educational background diversity. But there's not one person in any room I've ever walked into that doesn't have the ability to teach me something if I'm not, if as long as I have the interest in learning. And, I think that I was the beneficiary of a very similar environment when I was at Methodist. Was I started at the top. I mean, as an administrative resident, quite honestly, I was in the C-suite and I was attending board meetings, and I by week 2, I had to give an update at the administrative, management meeting, and I was treated as an equal to everyone else sitting around that table. And I had no experience whatsoever, but I had the ability to read everything I could on a certain subject, and listen and share ideas, and quite honestly, asking questions. And and most of it did not come because I learned it in a textbook. It was because I was curious, or I was looking at things in a different way. I remember very clearly having a conversation with my boss at Methodist and saying, "This person, she doesn't put in the same amount of effort that we are all putting in, and I don't understand, why do you give her a free ride?" And his response was, "Lauren, not everyone is going to be an A player. You're going to have some A players, you're going to have some B players, and you might even have a couple of C's. And hopefully, when it matters, you're going to take those C's and make them maximize themselves so that they'll be B's. But if you had a room full of A players, they'd all kill themselves. They'd all kill each other." And it was so right. And I look at things a lot differently now. And now, even looking back at what she did contribute and what why she was sitting at the table, because I mean, we'd be at our administrative staff meeting and she'd be on her BlackBerry, which was before the iPhone, and she'd be playing like solitaire. And but I don't understand, like, how do you let her get away with this? And it was because she lived in the community, and she knew and had the same mindset as the people who lived in Park Slope. So anytime we were going to do something in Park Slope, we wanted her opinion because we wanted to know what the community was going to think about a certain thing, like building a building that they certainly didn't want in their backyard. And so it's a matter of appreciating what everyone brings to the table, and as a leader, you're going to maximize their strengths. You're going to know what they're good at, and what they can contribute. And your job, regardless of what it is, it could be in a classroom, as an elementary school teacher, to an accountant or anywhere else. Your job is to figure out who brings what to the table and get as much out of them as possible, because at the end, that's how your group is going to succeed.
Wow, that was perfect. And it's funny because I have both Carmel and Elizabeth in class. I think I'm going to put them on the spot tomorrow in class to take over the lecture and get all the students to participate. We're actually covering new material tomorrow. So ladies, you're on task for tomorrow, chapter 7. Thank you, Lauren. I just
Sure.
love your style because you are so smart and so eloquent, but you're able to talk to the students at a level that they can tie into what you're saying. So I look forward to having you present to us again, because I've been to a lot of these, probably not as many as Tim. That's more in his wheelhouse. I'm on the faculty side, but I think that you have a lot to contribute to our students. I don't know what happened today. Maybe there was a miscommunication with the sign on. I'm not sure, but I know these two ladies definitely have benefited from you coming today, and I look forward to seeing you again.
Well, thank you. I appreciate it. And obviously, you have my contact information. If there's anything you're not really thinking about right now, or you don't know how to formulate a question, or you want to talk to me about anything, by all means, you can always reach out to me. Just probably have to provide a little context. Like, remember me? You spoke to me at that backpack and briefcase hour, and I would be more than happy to be a sounding board, share some ideas, listen, whatever it is that you might need.
This has been great. Thank you very much, Lauren, for joining us again. And we are actually having a tremendous number of these backpacks to briefcases, not only within business economics, but also across communications and theater and biology. So yes, Charlene is correct. I do get a lot of experience talking with a lot of different people in a lot of different places, but the same themes do apply. Being a writer, asking good questions, putting yourself with other folks who are ambitious and smart. Those are definitely themes that we hear about a lot. I will have to say that the other thing is making connections, and if you ever run across, I know that it's in a different system, but the Robert Wood Johnson Barnabas system, the chief medical officer is Jack Bonamo, and he's also an alumnus of distinction from SUNY Oneonta. Class is 72, so he's got a few more years in the system. But if there's ever a need to reach out, we can make that connection happen too.
Well, thank you. I appreciate that. I definitely recognize the name, and yeah, we work very closely. They are a competing system, but I will tell you, there's also a lot of collaboration with this as well.
That's fantastic. Well, as you hear my dog barking in the background, which is one of the problems of working at home, I'm going to call this session to an end.
My pleasure.
again,
Thank
thank
you
you.
so much for having me. Bye.
Thank you again.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Oh, there was a shy one in there.